Hello and welcome to another episode of the Paytech Show. This week we're back with another look at the Swift GPI. We'll be sitting down with ACI's Craig Ramsey. We also jet off to meet DBS Bank, who adopted the Swift GPI in 2017.
Right, Craig, first of all, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today. What is a GPI?
Swift GPI, Global Payments Innovation, and as the name suggests, it's a new way of handling global payments. Swift initially introduced GPI a couple of years ago now, and it was in response to the growing threat of new payments, alternative payments, that could see consumers and corporates making global payments cheaper and faster than was traditionally possible through the banking network with Swift.
How does that differ from what the whole sort of Swift network was before? What's so different between a Swift code and the old sort of batch way of processing payments? How does the GPI differ from that?
Well, the reality was that Swift hasn't really changed in 30 years. It was originally introduced as an alternative to Telex, which doesn't necessarily meet today's demands of a global community and a global business. Now with GPI, there's a new set of rules that go over the top of the Swift network, and it means that payments are made faster and with much better data being provided to all of the parties.
Over in Singapore, Managing Director of DBS Bank, Jasmine Ng, explained why the Swift GPI was so sorely needed in the ever-changing Asian market. Can you tell me how the corporate banking ecosystem has been changing recently in Singapore and Asia as a whole?
I think it has been a very exciting time in the last couple of years that we've seen in Asia, because the market is, especially from the regulations aspects for payment, has been opening up. The regulators has started to embrace more real-time payments 24/7. So markets like India, Hong Kong, Singapore in the last couple of years has introduced real-time capabilities from an infrastructure standpoint. Likewise, we are also seeing that from an ecosystem, there's more e-wallets, emergence of the e-wallets coming in. I've checked around, Malaysia has about 40 e-wallets and Singapore has close to 30 e-wallets today. So, which is phenomenon. And by that means that consumers are taking up they have more choices in terms of what they can look at for instant payments, using the e-wallets to pay so that they can get instant fulfillment for their products and services.
What made DBS want to be part of that system, and what does it offer your customers?
Part of the reason is because we've been hearing the voices of the clients. In most of the cross-border, there's always this anxiety, from business, because the reason for a lot of this cross-border is to either pay for a supply of goods to come through and all this, and only upon receipts by the counterparty that you envisage that either the goods are going to come across for, to be delivered, etc. So often than not, we get a lot of calls from customers that says, where is the transaction being reached, and which status is it, and where are they, etc. So when GPI came along, it was a good match in terms of what are the pain points that we've heard from the customers and how it could solve our bank's other issues as well, because our contact centers get calls every day regarding the transactions, and we think that this is actually a better way to service our customers, because it will be at the fingertips. We put this on our Ideal, our corporate banking platform, so customers can be on demand to check on the status.
Focusing in on specific markets now, we asked our interviewees just how close we are to continent-wide real-time reach.
The great thing about the Swift network is the ubiquity across the planet. We can send money to anywhere on the planet through the Swift network. We know it's going to arrive, but it relies on the correspondent banking model. It relies on the traditional rails that we've had for 25, 30, beyond years. And so everyone knows exactly what the accounting relationship is there. The money doesn't actually ever leave the banking system. So it's good for the banks to be able to track where the money is. It's safe for the banks. There's no settlement risk involved in Swift because of those correspondent banking relationships. And actually some of the alternative payment methods that are coming around, whether it's those that are focused more heavily on the consumers. You mentioned PayPal. Companies like TransferWise are also doing a lot of great work in the global payments. And of course there's Ripple, and there's been quite a public spat between Swift and Ripple over the last couple of years. But in reality, they're actually addressing very different markets. The bank shouldn't be looking at Ripple or Swift as one or the other. Ripple and Swift are part of the global payments ecosystem that we'll see in the future. And indeed TransferWise and PayPal and any others that are coming around. We see movements from MasterCard and Visa to get into the space for corporate global payments as well. One particular solution won't be the solution to all global payments in future, as it has been with Swift up until now. Different propositions, different service levels, and indeed different settlement risk are going to be considerations on how a payment should actually be sent to that end beneficiary.
So I think cross-border has been there for the longest time in terms of telegraphic transfers, type of transactions. But more and more customers are looking at how to get that at a faster speed. So the traditional of 3 to 5 days to get payments across to different countries is no longer the expectation. Customers are expecting instant if possible, but that's not impossible. That's really not possible. But however, still from a bank's perspective, we look at ways that we could help address the point on speed, a point on transparency and traceability to our customers for cross-border transactions. GPS supplements our whole proposition, because for markets where DBS do not have presence and we work with agent banks, the customers can see through GPI where the status of their transaction are. So that's the transparency, the traceability that we are giving to the customers from that, the status of where it is across the different countries or different banks. The other aspect is the transparency that GPI features also offer, because you will be able to see whether the accounts get credited and at what amount, or what kind of exchange rate that's applied to the transaction. So in all, I think today's cross-border payment types of services that we offer as a bank, it offers different aspects of capabilities that the client can enjoy within the DBS network as well as outside of DBS network. After we went on GPI, we get better transparency of the performance of our transaction. Back to your earlier point about getting accuracy of the data, or rather the payment instructions. On average, for our DBS transaction, about 60% actually today for cross-border is being successfully remitted within 2 hours. So actually with GPI, it also gave us more data insights. And I think with that, we can also learn from it and see whether there's other areas of improvement to educate our customers so that they get higher success rate and faster success rate for cross-border transactions.
What's important in all of this is the sender and the receiver of the money. They need to be able to have a consistent experience. So it's great that Swift have got their tracking database so that you can see exactly where the payment is, but that also needs to be aligned with tracking in Ripple and tracking in TransferWise. And actually the corporate customer doesn't want to see 5 different ways of seeing tracking data. That all needs to be brought back into the bank and actually consolidated into a single view for the corporate customer. So they don't care whether it's gone Ripple or TransferWise or Swift. They've just made a payment and they want to know that it's happened and it's got to the beneficiary appropriately.
That's all for this week's episode of the Paytech Show. Join us next time when we'll be taking another look at the Asian payments industry.